Mm-hmm. Okay, you all, we're going to come up in 5 seconds. All right, Snowman, you're here already. All right, all right, all right. And I'm going to give it a couple more, about 15 more seconds. Let me make it a clean 30 seconds in which we'll enter. Everybody like and share, like and share, like and share, like and share, like and share. We're up in 5, 4, 3. Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It is a joy to be with you. We just had a conversation as we talked about voting rights. They are on the chopping block. Please pay attention to the Supreme Court. Pay attention to the Supreme Court. Uh, all around the world, everyone is talking about the peace deal, Gaza and Israel. It's very interesting. Is it peace or is it a ceasefire? Which is it? And can we trust it? Can we trust it? And as we look at the hostages, and we are so glad that so many have come home, corporate media in the United States have only focused on the hostages. Many of them were prisoners of war, not hostages, actually. We've not heard the Palestinian stories. I bumped into a story last night, Bryce Green, of fairness and accuracy in reporting, that absolutely broke my heart, but it warmed me at the same time. A photojournalist had been held in captivity since October 2023, and he'd been told that his wife and children had been killed. Obviously, he was devastated. And they kept telling him this over and over and over again. It really was its own form of torture. And the cameras were recording his release as he walked up the stairs in his apartment building. And his wife walked out of the apartment. And obviously, and he just started screaming, and she did too. And then when his children came out, he almost collapsed. I said, wow, no one's telling that part of the story. As the people of Gaza have gone back home, what did they go home to? Well, they went home to a collapsed state. And they did go home to territories that they really don't control. They did go home to territories that others have brokered deals over to turn into a resort area. So, what's really going to happen? What's really going on here? And what about the West Bank, where the illegal settlements continue to proliferate? Well, I said, let me go to this brilliant, brilliant guy who's with us, going to be with us every Tuesday at this time, so that we can talk about what we are looking at. Because indeed, this is a very, very consequential moment in geopolitics. When Prime Minister Netanyahu spoke at the United Nations, uh, the world walked out. The applause that you heard were from people that he brought with him. He did not go to the peace summit in Egypt, even though President Trump had invited him. Well, President Erdogan of Turkey said, no, he may not come. If he comes, I won't be there. That's consequential because they have the biggest, strongest army in the region, more than 4 million strong. So let's talk about this. I mean, now that we've kind of settled in on this and we've had the euphoria of more than 1,700 Palestinians who've been returned home, and uh, the rest of uh, the rest of the hostages, the Israeli hostages, everyone getting home, I think is a very, very important thing. And I'm happy for everyone. And my heart breaks for those who lost their families in October of 2023. And thinking about the tens of thousands of people buried beneath the rubble, Bryce Green. The Lancet study said that they expected north of 500,000 people to be killed in this conflict. And Ralph Nader said last year that the data shows that more than 200,000 people had been killed, and that was last year. So the count that's palatable, and it shouldn't be, is more than 60,000. But everyone knows it's triple, quadruple that, if not more. So, welcome back to the show. I'm always so glad to have you here, and you're going to be here regularly at this time. Talk to me. When we were talking about what we would be discussing today, you said, well, of course, this issue, it's uppermost in everyone's minds. Why do you think so? I mean, and I don't care where you are ideologically on the political spectrum. It is something that has got people, and interestingly enough, Americans engaged in ways that we have not seen. What's going on here?
Right. Well, I mean, your first question about this is, I think, a really key one. Is this a peace deal or is it a ceasefire deal? And it is very much the latter. It's not a peace deal, right? The entire conflict between Israel and Palestine, and between the Israelis and their Zionist project, and the Arabs who want to, carry out their own national project. I mean, that has its roots, deep historical roots, in this Israeli European US backed project to, and they were pretty open about it back in the day, colonize Palestine. And this fundamental issue has not been resolved, right? Israel's still there. The far right in Israel still say regularly that their plan is to eventually have this vision of greater Israel restored. That includes Gaza, that includes the West Bank, it includes parts of Syria, it includes parts of Lebanon. It's widespread. Those guys are still in power. Those guys still have, a massive military, a massive, patron in the U.S. backing them. That hasn't stopped. What has stopped now is this phase that has started on October 7th and has continued with brief pauses up until now. This deal that was brokered is just a pause. It might be a long pause. It might be a pause that allows the Palestinians enough time to rebuild, but we're not sure about that. Officially, the deal is that Hamas would release the bodies of the dead hostages and release the living hostages, and they seem to be complying with that. The living hostages were returned in these past few days, while they're still getting together some of the bodies of the dead hostages. And this has gone off from Hamas's side fairly well. On Israel's side, they agreed to withdraw, not fully from Gaza, mind you. This is a major concession for the Palestinians. They're not, the deal doesn't have them withdrawing fully from Gaza, but only back several miles from the current borders. And so effectively, they've taken all of Gaza's agricultural land. They've taken a lot of their, they demolished all of these buildings, and so they've really left the Palestinians with really less than nothing. And so the reason that this deal happened isn't because the Israelis have suddenly decided to be benevolent and have decided to recognize the legitimate aspirations and rights of the Palestinian people. It's happened for other reasons, which we can speculate about. And those are the reasons that really answer this question, your second question, as to whether or not we can trust it. If we accept the reporting, and I know the reporting on this, especially on the relationship between Trump and Netanyahu, it can't always be relied upon, especially as we saw with the case in the Iran strikes. They were deliberately seeding stories in the press to make it seem like there was a rift between Trump and Netanyahu, whereas in reality, they were both planning to launch a surprise attack, and they did launch a surprise attack on Iran. So we must take the reporting with a grain of salt. But if that is to be accepted, the dominant narrative is this: after Israel attacked Hamas's negotiators in Qatar.
Mhm.
Now, Qatar is hosting Hamas negotiators and Egyptian mediators and Israeli negotiators, and also some of the U.S. people. Israel, because they're not interested in genuine peace. They actually tried to assassinate the people who were negotiating. They did assassinate some of the people who were negotiating. They tried to assassinate more. But after this really harmed U.S. interest. And Trump, who has been one of the only presidents to publicly, at least publicly, display some sort of resistance to Netanyahu, was reportedly very upset about this.
Mhm.
And he personally, well, maybe not him personally, but he had a apology written for Netanyahu that Netanyahu then delivered, and it was this that then pushed the U.S. to further lean on the Israelis to accept this peace deal. Now, this peace deal, or the ceasefire deal, sorry,
No, before you continue, why was the apology so consequential?
because throughout the entire Biden administration, the Israelis were able to act with almost complete impunity. There
Mhm.
were public stories about, oh, Biden is so frustrated with Netanyahu that Netanyahu he can't be reined in. These were all, of course, nonsense. The Biden administration has the ability to stop Netanyahu by simply saying, we're not going to fund you. But for political reasons, they didn't do so. And Israelis were actually joking at the time about how impotent the Biden administration was, about how they could say whatever they want and do whatever they want, and that they only had to wait until Trump was in office, and then because they knew that Joe Biden wasn't going to win. The Israelis were joking about how much they were able to get away with under Joe Biden. But when Trump came into office, I think we all remember that one of the first things that happened was this ceasefire between Hamas and Israel that laid out groundwork for what an eventual Israeli withdrawal and Hamas, releasing the hostages. This was a deal that had been on the table for months and months. It had been on the table since October 9th, 2023. A lot
Mhm.
of people don't remember this, that Hamas offered to return all the hostages in exchange for an easing of the blockade and the guarantee from Israel not to invade Gaza. But Israel rejected this because, of course, they wanted to invade Gaza. That seems to be why they allowed the October 7th attack to happen. But quite apart from that, um, the Trump administration pushed Netanyahu to agree to this ceasefire deal. Again, this is based on the reporting. There are certainly alternative motives involved. For example, replenishing their defenses and replenishing their troops and ammunition. That was also a motivation for Israel. But regardless, the only time a ceasefire actually happened, or since October or since 2023, was when Trump came into office, and so this seems to be a repeat of that. It seems to be a similar deal that is phased withdrawal, phases of returning hostages, and it seems to be more permanent than this past one. But only time will tell. But the fact is that we don't know if this ceasefire deal can be trusted, because the first ceasefire deal in January, the one I was just talking about, well, Israel just one day decided that they didn't want to abide by it, and they
Mhm.
launched a massive attack on Gaza, restarting the hostilities, uh, and massacring people in the process. And then came the further restrictions of aid, which led to even more images of starvation that we are all familiar with and all horrified by. Uh, so there's no guarantee that Israel won't do this again. There's no guarantee uh, that Israel won't simply decide on some pretext. Maybe there'll be some gunfire that happens and Israeli says, oh well, this is why we have to go back in. Or maybe there'll be uh maybe because of the delay in returning all of the bodies of the Israeli hostages, maybe they'll use that as some sort of pretext to go in and continue attacking. We can't know. But as I mentioned earlier, the people who wanted this attack to happen, who wanted October 7th to happen, and who wanted to invade
Mhm.
Gaza and take it over, turn it into their own personal, resort. The people who want to annex the West Bank and turn that into part of Greater Israel. All the people who want that are still there. There's been no political change in Israel that says that, oh well, there's a new government now, and now these people are going to behave more humanely towards the Palestinians. Nothing of that sort has happened. And so we should expect that the Israelis will continue their long stated and very vocal plans to completely wipe out Gaza.
Well, Bryce Green, I think we have to go back to September of 2023 when Prime Minister Netanyahu was speaking at the United Nations. When he presented his new map of the Middle East, it did not include Gaza, it did not include the West Bank. What does that say?
Well, it says exactly what I'm saying, that there is a vision within the Israeli political class of what's called Greater Israel. There's Israel, right, the state with its borders that were solidified in 1967, which we can talk about the issues inherent in that.
Hmm.
But quite beyond with the 67 borders are this vision of integrating the West Bank, integrating Syria, the Golan Heights. In fact, Israel's occupying more of Syria after the Al Qaeda affiliated group HTS took over Syria from Bashar al Assad. So now Israel's occupying more of Syria than ever. I'm sure many of them are talking about keeping large chunks of that. They also have visions of occupying Lebanon. Some of them even have visions of occupying Egypt, parts of Saudi Arabia, and Jordan. I mean, this is real lunatic stuff. This is real, Nazi Lebensraum levels of thinking with these people. But that is one of the core reasons why this war has continued. The Israelis will always give some pretext of security. They'll say that it's so important that Israel has the right to defend itself, but everyone knows that if Israel wanted to be safe, the easiest thing they could do is to end occupation. But they refuse to do that because they want the land, and so that is the thinking behind this map. That was the thinking behind allowing October 7th to happen. And if you aren't aware of Israeli foreknowledge and facilitation of October 7th, uh, I mean, maybe we can talk about that on a separate program, but you can just go and look at the New York Times about how the Israelis had plans of the October 7th attack over a year in advance. And you can go and read the Israeli press about how they ignored consistent warnings. They even moved the location of that festival right to next to a military base 3 days before October 7th while they were getting warnings about an incoming attack. I mean, it's all ridiculous. But it all points to the fact that Israel wanted to utilize this attack as a pretext to flatten Gaza. And that's exactly what they did. It also explains why they haven't been seriously negotiating. I mean, you can go, like I said, on October 9th, 2023, Hamas offered a peace deal, but there has been numerous peace deals that have been offered since then that were completely torpedoed by the Israelis unilaterally. I mean, it's a matter of public record, but this is because of this image of Greater Israel, and so now we have this peace, this uneasy peace, this uneasy ceasefire between Hamas and the Israelis. It already seems like Israel is violating the ceasefire in many ways. In fact, Hamas has said as much just in
There
the
were
last
reports.
24 hours.
Yeah,
Israel has killed up to 9 Palestinians. They've
there are
probably killed far
reports,
more.
but you only hear that in the independent press. You don't hear that at all in corporate media. In fact, they're celebrating uh, the peace deal. I said, wait a minute, but I'm independent press. The independent press are reporting more Palestinian deaths. No one is talking about the torture experienced by the Palestinians who they were hostages because they'd not been charged. They were being held without charge and no trial. What is that? So help me to understand just really what are the issues as you see them, and that's let me just get right down to what is really happening here because you saw Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump go and they were in what is it, Hostage Square. Tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of people were there. They gathered there all the time, and um, they
Oh,
were.
they're calling it Hostage Square, like in Tel Aviv. I didn't realize that they had a location called that.
Oh, oh, absolutely. And they said, look, when they mentioned uh, President Trump, there were cheers. When they mentioned Prime Minister Netanyahu, there was a chorus of boos. How are we to read that? And just because who's in charge here? Because Prime Minister Netanyahu is really not even to the far right of his party, at least not publicly, right? There are people who are far more extreme than he. What is next? I
Well,
mean, what do they want? I mean, what's at play here?
inside of Israel, there's a very complicated political situation in which the people of Israel, largely, and go and look at opinion polls, are very skeptical of Netanyahu and very critical of him. I mean, just because he's corrupt, right? He's openly and nakedly corrupt, getting jobs for and payouts for himself and his sons and his cronies and his buddies. I mean, every other day, it seemed like before October 7th, there was some story in the Israeli press about how Netanyahu was abusing his position of power to enrich himself or the people closest to him. And Israel has this veneer of democracy in which, people expect that their leaders are to adhere to some sort of democratic standards, at least when it comes to dealing with Israelis. But the flip side of that is that an overwhelming majority of Israelis do not care about the Palestinians. In fact, they are actively hostile towards them. If you look at polls asking Israelis, do you care about the fact that people are starving in Gaza? Uh, Overwhelming majority say no. Overwhelming majority. Overwhelming majorities of Israelis say that they believe that that Israel isn't using enough force in Gaza and that they should ramp up their attacks, or that they're using the right amount of force in the daily massacres and all of the like. The Israeli public is a really bloodthirsty populace, and so the fact that they are critical of Netanyahu but supportive of the war might seem like a contradiction to American audiences, uh, but it's not a contradiction there. In the U.S., we have what I like to call Netanyahu washing, which is when all the crimes of the Israeli state and the Israeli public and Israeli settlers, all of them are just put on the backs of Benjamin Netanyahu. You'll talk to your average liberal Zionist friend and say, "Well, what do you think about what Israel's doing in Gaza? Don't you think they should stop?" They say, "Well, what Netanyahu is doing is so terrible, and no one I know supports Netanyahu." You see the shift
Mhm.
of blame away from the political structures in Israel writ large onto this single guy. It's the same thing that Americans try to do with Donald Trump. You'll say, "Oh, there's so much wrong with America. America's, turning fascist." And then, some genius liberal will be like, "Oh, yes, well, things were different before Donald Trump. And, if we just get Donald Trump out of there, it'll all be better." This is a fallacy. It is a fallacy when they say it in Israel. It is complete nonsense when they say it in America. These are deep seated political issues that are built into the structure of the political economy in both places. And so uh, throughout the war, there were all of these protests in Israel saying, "We don't like the fact that Netanyahu is standing in the way of a deal." Why? It's not because they're saying that Palestinian rights are being violated, that there's a genocide, and that they are against genocide. It's because they want their hostages back, right? In Israel, the Netanyahu and the military establishment, they don't really care about the hostages. Like I said, it's about this greater Israel vision. But the general public in Israel, they do care about the hostages, right? So they bought all of that propaganda. They buy the idea that the IDF is there to defend the people of Israel and the that Israel is a safe haven for the Jewish people. They buy all of that and they take it seriously. And when Netanyahu acts against those interests by doing a genocide and not getting these hostages back, well, then they react towards it. But make no mistake, this is not about the Palestinian people. They have no care for it. Trump is an interesting case because he's an outside figure in Israel. He's not even uh, he's not an Israeli citizen. He's not even Jewish. He doesn't live over there. But so much of his political posturing in America is about being, Israel's greatest friend. He was recently giving a talk in Israel. I think you saw this as well, but he called out Miriam Adelson.
Yes.
Um, Miriam Adelson, of course, is the wife, the widow of Sheldon Adelson, one of the top donors in the American political system. Uh,
And she's his top donor. President Trump's top
and
donor.
Trump's top donor. And Trump has this thing where he lies when he should tell the truth, but he tells the truth when he's expected to lie. And so he
Stop right,
straight up
stop right, because he said a lot
quite a
to and
bit.
about her, and he exposed a lot. That please speak to that.
So one of the things that he's saying, I mean, we've all heard about the power of the Israel lobby in America, and we've all heard these stories. I mean, Matt Gaetz was talking about how, at APEC donor events, the donors wear QR code, or the candidates wear QR codes, and then they go and mingle with the donors, and if the donor likes them, they scan that QR code,
Scan the code.
donate a few $1,000s. I mean, it's ridiculous.
He even looked like when he was describing it, he said, "This is the craziest thing I've ever seen."
Yeah.
It's like it was like they were fresh meat.
Yeah,
And
it's
they
like
were
a,
being
it's like an auction. It's like a it's like, oh, you like what I'm saying here? Oh, did I hit all the right shibboleths for you?
Wait a
Well,
minute.
then
And
donate
then
to me.
they scan you, and I said, "Oh,
Yeah.
wow,
And,
okay."
this is the tip of the iceberg of like Israel lobby nonsense. I mean, it's like really freaky. Every person in Congress has someone in APAC that they report to, or
Thank you,
report to might
Thomas
be
Massey.
strong. But
Thomas
yeah,
Massey.
except Thomas Massey. Thomas Massey is one of the exceptions, but everyone else has like an APAC minder, where if they say something that's like not sufficiently pro-Israel, then the minder will be like, "Hey, excuse me, Congressman, you're supposed to support Israel. You can't say Palestine. You can say the Palestinians, but you can't say Palestine because that implies that there's a country, and we don't believe the country. Things like that. This is what the Israel lobby does. But what Trump's comments in Israel, they raise that to a whole new level, because in this case, he's talking about making active policy, not even making policy decisions, but even being uh even them telling him about this policy issue that he didn't know anything about. Like, he didn't know anything about the embassy. He didn't
And the
really have
Golan
the Golan Heights, which I think they built like a monument to Trump there, or they named something after him over
Yes.
there. Just ridiculous stuff. But in this speech, he says that this idea to do this policy came from the Adelsons, and that he was actually complaining that, oh, I gave the Adelsons so much. I gave them the Golan, I gave them the embassy, and they still want more, more, more. And then, I mean,
And they
this
come
is a
every time
damning
they come.
admission.
They've been to the White House more than anybody.
They've been to the White House more than anyone. He said that Sheldon Adelson would call him up, and Trump would say, "Hey, well, I'm the president of the United States. You can't just come over." And then he would just come over. I mean, this is a crazy admission of the impotence of the American presidency in the face of the Israel lobby. But one of the other interesting things that he says is that, I mean, this is just out in the open. It's crazy that he would say this. Was that he said that he asked Miriam Adelson one time which country she loves more, Israel or America, and he said that she wouldn't answer, and he said that, well, in my mind, that meant that it was Israel. I mean, he's openly saying.
But Sheldon Adelson said as much. He said, "I can't wait for our children to grow up and go and join the IDF."
Yeah. I mean,
Oh my!
there's this whole trope, this idea of like dual loyalty, and that like some people are both loyal to America and to Israel, and a lot of people like claim that this like an anti-Semitic trope. It's nothing of the sort. I mean, but I mean, in reality, it seems that a lot of these people simply aren't loyal to America at all, and there is no. I think it was Jonathan Pollard, who
Yes,
was a spy, Israeli spy in
not
America.
just a spy. He did more damage to the American security establishment than anyone in history.
Right, and I mean, the Israeli spying on America was another whole like
No, but he
rabbit hole.
he took it to a whole different level.
Right, but he reportedly said that there is no dual loyalty. It is just loyalty to Israel, and that's a crazy thing to say. I can't speak to every single congressman, every single Zionist in America to say that they believe that, but certainly the ones with the most power and influence in the American political system, a lot of them do believe that. I mean, that explains why, supporting Israel is such a high priority for so many people in the American government, at the expense of the American public. right? If you want to run an empire, if you want to rule the world and control all the oil resources, the last thing you want to do is get all the Arabs pissed off at you because you're supporting Israel as they colonize and expel and genocide their fellow Arabs. That's the last thing you would do. It's totally irrational. But it becomes rational when you consider that Zionism has been such a salient political force in the American political economy that it becomes the path of least resistance to support Israel uh, rather than actually sticking up for your perceived American imperial interest. And so, Israel is a pillar of American society at the expense of its relationship with almost every other country in the world. And between the Biden supported Ukraine war and the Trump continuation of it, and the Biden supported genocide and the Trump continuation of it, but maybe a potential halt, between all of that, you've really seen America's standing in the world diminish dramatically. And if you're like an imperialist and if you believe that America should be the top dog in the world, well, this is actively harming those interests. But if you're an American political animal, then you realize that, well, the pro Israel crowd, they have the money, they have the political clout, they have the infrastructure that's going to allow me to stay in office. So I'm going to continue to throw in my lot with those guys.
So, what do you think that other people listened, and what do you think the reaction to his comments about Miriam Adelson, how did they resonate? And I'm asking you because 3/4 of young Republicans are now, they have met the young Democrats and progressives. They are adamantly opposed to our involvement with Israel. I mean, they have met, they are on the same page. I mean, when you listen to um, Matt Gaetz and Tucker Carlson and so many others, they are stridently, and Charlie Kirk, quite frankly,
Towards
um,
the end of his life, yeah.
towards the end of his life. And I'm not talking about a heart thing, but his base had shifted, so he had to move because he was going to lose them, and he knew that. So, I mean, so with Palestinians, according to independent press reports, they're being killed. Um, I'm wondering how this is going to pan out, Bryce Green, because people, I think that the view of the Middle East has fundamentally shifted in the United States. And I just wonder if if Netanyahu and his ilk really understand that. I think that, I mean, and buying TikTok and CBS is not going to change that. As a matter of fact, I think it's making it worse, Bryce Green.
Well, this entire buying of TikTok and the CBS merger. I mean, I think that's worth dwelling on because it is a response to these trends that you're talking about. It's like you said, the polls are very clear. The young people on the right and left are becoming more and more critical of Israel and more sympathetic to the Palestinians, which, of course, normal human beings should. But that is not a result of people being fundamentally different throughout generations. It's largely a result of the information spaces that we all have. If even young Republicans, some of them are crazy lunatics, but even them, they're seeing these dead bodies, they're seeing these starving children, they're seeing these lunatic Israeli statements about how they're not done and they're going to keep going. And they're saying, well, no, I don't think we should be spending our money on that. I don't think my hard-earned tax dollars should be given to this lunatic madman who thinks that the land was given to him by God. Maybe we should spend our money on something else, like I don't know, whatever Republicans want. They're thinking like that, and that's because of the information space. There aren't gatekeepers that can prevent the general American public from seeing that information. People aren't only reading the New York Times. People aren't only watching CNN. And so that really uh, raised alarm bells in pro-Israel circles. If we look at the TikTok ban, right, this was something that was going on under Biden, that was finalized under Trump, and that was kind of put on the back burner until very recently, until they found an American buyer for TikTok. But the impetus for that, in large part, was the Israeli government. They were lobbying the US, saying that this is one of the ways that we are losing the young people because they have access to TikTok and other information systems, and they are getting bombarded with all this criticism of Israel, and that's what's changing the minds. And I think there's a lot of merit to that, right? Like I said, if you have different information, you're going to make different political
Mhm.
decisions. And so
So,
that's why the TikTok is now being bought by Larry Ellison. Now, Larry Ellison is the head of Oracle. Oracle is a major CIA contractor. In fact, I think one of their first clients was the CIA, but they've since grown to be an enormous pillar uh, of just the U.S. economy writ large. You know, it's a multi-billion-dollar company, and Ellison has been dedicated to Israel his whole life, and openly, proudly pro-Israel, even throughout the genocide. And so, giving him control of a platform like this uh, might see a pretty dramatic shift in their policies. Because I mean, some people say that these platforms don't really have control over what their people see. That's nonsense. They absolutely do. They can throttle content. They can decide what regime of censorship they're going to impose on their user base. They can decide what users and what accounts are going to get boosted and banned or suppressed or shadow banned or what have you. They have enormous control. And so giving this control to an ultra Zionist like Ellison, well, I mean, that is something that Israel is very happy with. If they're worried about TikTok being able to influence people to be anti Israel, well, then the solution is to just buy TikTok and try and get them to be pro Israel. And it's also the same with CBS. CBS is has a very deep history in America. It's one of the first, it's one of the OG three networks. You have
mhm.
ABC, NBC, CBS. Now, CBS, of course, has had a historically close relationship with the intelligence agencies, and the CIA. And one of the heads of CBS was given, very deep control within the U.S. government. But that's neither here nor there. They still produce decent stuff. 60 Minutes, pretty good
Mhm.
program as far as American mainstream media goes. But this Barry Weiss business is really a stain on records. I mean, it's
Explain who she is.
so Barry Weiss. I believe she got her start in college being someone just attacking people for being pro-Israel or for being anti-Israel, for being critical of Israel, and then she went
Attacking
on.
professors, and
Yeah,
she's going to work
professors.
on professors.
Exactly. And she worked her way up into being labeling herself as a free thinker. I gotta say, I've never heard an intelligent person refer to themselves as a free thinker. Just between you and me, anyone who says that is usually just trying to conceal some right-wing nonsense, which it turns out she was. And in the wake of the New York Times reshifting to the right after Trump's first victory, she was hired there as an opinion columnist, where she was reportedly the single most annoying person in the world, to the point where she was being openly roasted by her colleagues. She would misrepresent what was being said in meetings. The fact that she was tweeting about meetings, also insane. And so she sort of fired herself. She likes to say that she was kicked out of the New York Times, that she was pushed out of the New York Times, but it was more like a 3-year-old throwing a tantrum. And she definitely didn't. She wasn't fired, but she just left on her own accord. It was during that time where a lot of people with large platforms were complaining about how censored they were. They're like, I'm being censored, they said to their 2 million followers. Whatever, that's her business. But in the wake of that, she started a blog called Common Sense. Irony, because she has none. Uh, and then that that whole project got folded into this thing called the Free Press, which is, yeah, I mean, just a nonsense outlet. Their most famous piece was their article claiming that there was no famine in Gaza, and that the pictures of starving children were manipulated because some of these children had pre-existing conditions. It's a very mean-spirited article. I mean, it kind of makes you want to vomit in your mouth if you think about it. But they said that, oh well, this kid had a pre-existing condition. They were shot in the head by an Israeli munition, and you can't blame all of their problems on mere starvation. They had other problems. It's ridiculous. Of course, that's how famines work. They take the most vulnerable people first. If a kid has cerebral palsy or a protein deficiency or what have you, well, then the famine is going to hit them first, and that's where those images come from. But whatever. This is Barry Weiss's whole thing. This is her outlet. And now it was pretty fringe too. I must say, like, you've been in this media business a lot longer than I have. But if an outlet isn't profitable, if they don't have a lot of subscribers and their subscribers aren't giving them a lot of money, they have to get their money from outside. Uh, that means that someone with a lot of money really liked what was going on at the Free Press, and we see proof of that in the fact that Barry Weiss is being tapped as head of CBS, which is, I mean, it's really hard to describe how crazy that is. I mean, this is like if this is like if Alex Jones were, like, better looking, and then someone decided to make him head of, like, the New York Times. Like, this is that level of insanity. But it's one of those things that becomes perfectly rational if you're a pro-Israel stooge and you realize that this massive network of news division is ripe for the taking, and you need to shape public opinion in your favor. Well, then someone like Barry Weiss, who is willing to debase herself and beclown herself by publishing just dumb nonsense, but she'll do it for you, it becomes perfectly rational. Put her in the top of CBS. She reports directly to David Ellison. And David Ellison, of course, is the son of Larry Ellison, who is the Oracle guy that I was just talking about, who bought TikTok. And then combine that with the fact that you have Elon Musk running Twitter. I was going to call it X, but I'm not calling it X. I'm still on that grind. You have Elon Musk running Twitter, and then you have Mark Zuckerberg running Facebook and Instagram. Both of them are pretty devoted to Israel and very uncritical of Israeli control and power over the American system. So you have some of the largest media platforms and media outlets being sucked up and gobbled up by people who have a vested interest in shaping American opinion in support of Israel. This is a very dangerous state of affairs. This is, like, kind of terrifying. This is the kind of thing that keeps me up at night. The fact that all the worst kinds of people, the worst people on the planet, have such a direct main line into the minds of the general public. Now, this is something that, like I said, is brought on by the fact that Israel's behaving so awfully. Who knows if it'll work? I'm not certain that you'll be able to fully cover up the fact that, Israel's massacring babies and literally raping people on live television and just being overtly barbaric in their genocide. And, I don't know if, maybe you could buy every single media outlet in the world, but the internet's still free enough that the real information will get through. But who knows? Who knows? But this is why this is happening, and this is how it ties into this issue of Palestine, and this is why I'm worried about the coming media landscape in America, as it's becoming more and more censored and more controlled by people who just have the worst intentions. Just the worst intentions. I won't mince word about that. I mean, go read what they say. These are not good people.
I mean, and Solomon, that's really, you said he's very opinionated, and he is. And the name calling doesn't bring the sides together at all. Please be objective. What do you say to that?
Well, I'm not really trying to bring the sides together, quote unquote. I'm trying to tell it how it is. If you want to, go and sit down with someone who really supports Israel, and if you want to have a good conversation with them, I've had plenty of conversations like that. Go and do it. But I'm talking to you, Santita, and I'm talking to the rest of everybody. And I will say what I think. I'm perfectly capable of having, nice and polite and cordial conversations with people who disagree with me. But I mean, that's not what's going on right now. I'm talking to you about what I see as what's going on in the world right now, and those names that I'm calling, I will stand by that 100%.
Because I don't think the conversation has been impolite, with all due respect. I think what you've done, we talked about Miriam Adelson, and the fact that she was cited in such a significant way. I think that's something that you need to analyze, because people who are that powerful generally remain hidden.
Right.
And the quiet part was spoken out loud. I think that is what was unsettling, because he let you know that she and her husband have had, her husband is now deceased, but she has an outsized influence, and they're shaping geopolitics and
Right.
events. And you've got to be able to speak to that. Everybody's not going to feel good about it. I don't do name calling here. That's not what he's done. What we're talking about
Well,
is,
okay, I do call names sometimes. I
well,
won't
no,
deny
but
that I do that
yeah,
sometimes.
yeah, but you haven't done it here. I mean, because I don't do that. But that having been said, we've got to call balls and strikes. What is
Right.
happening here is of tremendous consequence. Oh, hey, I've seen you on social media, and I'm not mad at you. You people come for you, and you're like, I'm ready, bring it on. That having been said, what we're talking about is we already have American troops on the ground over there. We do. And you ought to be concerned about that. While Americans are struggling, we don't have enough money to get from payday to Sunday, let alone Monday. Um, we have to fight over subsidies for the farmers who are now killing themselves, Bryce Green. There's a quiet epidemic going on in America's farms. Our farmers, this 100% tariff on China. China is now, they're the biggest market in the world. They're the biggest economy in the world. They are now shifting their attention to other countries, and other countries are shifting their attentions to them. And we have lost so much standing in the world, Bryce Green, because of our stance on Palestine and Israel. And it has hurt us tremendously. And I think, we have to talk about that honestly. If you care about this country, you can be critical of the country, and I'm a critic because I love the country. I've been all over the world, and I have stayed in many places for extended periods of time. I don't want to live anyplace else. I am an American. I really am. That having been said, I'm looking at some things that are damaging. And this is what we're talking about, Bryce. These things are damaging. When one point of view that is contrary to our best interest is running the country, that's what's got a lot of people very warm today, Bryce Green. Because we were looking at that over there while we've got ice on our streets. I mean, wait a minute. We've got a police state that is already here. So, and you're telling me that you're buying up the media outlets, I have no say. Let's be fair. Let's be fair. So, please, what did you say? You said these little folks, and this is kind of where we're going to end it right here. You said these little folks are destroying themselves. Power destroys itself. Absolutely. They fight and they hate each other. Well, that's not what the Palestinians are doing. I don't know who you're talking about. This was not a war. Wars are between armies, Bryce. This was a war on a people. And I wonder what's going to happen to them now that they've gone back home. I admire their pluck, because they have said, like Jennifer Holliday in Dreamgirls, and I saw the original version, and everybody went to hear her sing that one song. And I'm telling you, I am not going. That is what they've said. And yet, here we are. Here we are. I mean, where are we? What do you see, Bryce?
Well, like I said, these images of Palestinians returning home, and these reunions, they're very heartening. They're very heartening to see, and especially after watching nothing but death and destruction, watching people try and get aid being gunned down by the fake Gaza Humanitarian Foundation or Fund or whatever they called it. Just
Unra.
it is so much. There's so much relief that's palpable in the air. But it hangs on the edge of a knife, right? Like I said, this vision of greater Israel is what animates the Israeli political economy. And that didn't just go away because, Trump waved his finger sternly and said, hey, you got to tone this down.
Mhm.
That didn't go away because the Israeli economy is shrieking and the war effort is a major drain on their society. That didn't go away because IDF soldiers are killing themselves in mass because they can't live with the things that they have been asked to do and the things that they already did. That didn't go away. And it, Greater Israel, this entire project, it depends not only on maintaining oppression and attacks on the Palestinians, but it also relies on there being no other regional actors that could potentially stop Israel if it wants. And this is where we turn back to Iran. There's been a lot of chatter in the last few months about a renewed Israeli attack on Iran, and I think the ceasefire deal actually, I think it makes it more likely that we're going to see an Israeli attack on Iran. They didn't. There's a lot of unfinished business that happened after the 12 Days War. The 12 Days War, of course, was when Israel surprise attacked Iran. Uh, and then the U.S. also surprise attacked Iran a week later. And, they traded blows. The Israelis didn't do that on accident. They didn't do that on a whim. They didn't just think, hey, let's bomb Iran today. No, they have a plan to dismantle Iran, to topple its regime, and to ensure that no regional rivals exist to prevent Israel from carrying out its plan of Greater Israel. This is planning that goes back at least to the mid 1990s when some of the neocons who ran the Bush administration, they also helped write a policy paper for Benjamin Netanyahu. And yes, Benjamin Netanyahu was in charge of Israel in the 90s. I think people forget just how persistent this guy's been, what a persistent presence this guy's been in American and Israeli politics. But they issued a document called the Clean Break, a strategy for dealing with any peer or near peer rivals in the Middle East. And it essentially just said, like, yeah, you got to take out Iran, you got to take out Saddam, you got to take out Gaddafi, you got to take out all these guys, got to take out Assad. I mean, it pretty much laid the foundation for the American foreign policy for the next 2 decades. Because I mean, we got Gaddafi, we got Saddam, we recently got Assad. The only pillar that's really still standing is Iran and maybe and Hezbollah in Lebanon. And so the Israeli attack on Iran was aimed at fulfilling that goal earlier this year. And now that the Israelis are more focused or are less focused on Gaza and they're more focused on other things, I suspect that an attack on Iran might be imminent. And I'm not the only one saying this. Trita Parsi. I don't know if you know him or
Yes,
have ever talked to him.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I've
Well,
never spoken with him, but I follow Trita.
well, if you ever get the chance, you should. I've never done so, but his interviews are spectacular. He
Mhm.
wrote an article, I believe it was in Responsible Statecraft, where he's a fellow, about predicting like this new conflict in Iran for a lot of some of the geopolitical reasons I mentioned, some of the internal logics inherent in Israeli society. It's well worth the read, but he's not the only one saying this. Lots of people are saying this. Lots of Palestinians are saying this. The
Why is this
Iranian,
consequential?
I'm sorry.
Why is this consequential?
Well, it's consequential because an attack on Iran isn't just an Israeli attack on Iran. It also involves the United States and it involves other actors, whether or not Jordan's going to collaborate, whether or not the Saudis are going to collaborate.
Mhm.
These are big questions in which regional actors have some big choices to make about what they're going to end up doing. And if there was to be a full-blown war with Iran, there's no guarantee that it would go in Israel's favor. I mean, the 12 Days War ended in part because Israel simply didn't have the munitions to be able to defend against Iranian attacks. And so the Iranians were sending drones, and the famous Iron Dome was nowhere to be seen. It was depleted. They ran out of ammo. And so this could be a disaster for Israel, but it could also be a disaster for the entire region. If the U.S.
Mhm.
gets more deeply involved, then you could see massive strikes on Iran using American naval and air power. That would be devastating for the people in Iran, and of course, it wouldn't just stay in Iran. it would spill out to the rest of the region. This is a significant thing. I mean, you were there. I was 5, but you were there when the U.S. invaded Iraq,
Oh, yeah.
and what a disaster that was. And Iran is a country, like 3 or 4 times the size of Iraq, and that not only are they, more entrenched and bigger, but they also have the, the benefit of hindsight, the benefit of
Mhm.
dealing with this axis of resistance in the Middle East and their uh, wars and their combat experience with Israel. I mean, this wouldn't go well, but if the Americans and Israelis are committed to it, this could be a disaster for the entire world. And this to say nothing of the spillover effects of refugees going into places. This to say nothing, of course, of the climate effects of a major war in Iran. This to say nothing of all that. It would be an absolute disaster, and that's where Israeli policy is headed. There's a lot of people who say that, well, if Israel just has the ability to live in peace with its neighbors, it would do so. This isn't the case. Iran has been trying to live in kind of some sort of modus vivendi with Israel for quite some time, and so have all the other countries. So have the Palestinians. So has Hamas. But Israel doesn't want that. Israel does not want even the threat of Greater Israel being challenged to exist. That I think is the root of many of the conflicts that we see in the Middle East. I mean, it's of course closely linked with these issues of hydrocarbons, like oil and gas and pipelines and things like that. But a lot of that stuff is often subordinated to the interest of Israel. I mean, if you really want an interesting take on the Iraq War, Gary Vogler, who was a guy who was the one of the like the leading oil czars in the post U.S. Iraq. He wrote a book recently over the last, I think, a few years ago, arguing that the war was spurred in large part, by Israeli interests. It wasn't a war for American oil companies. If you look at what happened, American oil companies didn't really benefit all that much from the Iraq war beyond prices. Uh, but if we look at who got Iraq's oil, a lot of that stuff seemed to be aimed at getting a pipeline from Kirkuk to Haifa, which is in Israel, and
Mhm.
allowing Israel to, have energy security. If Israel is able to have energy security, then it can carry out its vision of greater Israel a lot more clearly. Uh, a similar thing is what happened in Syria, right? Syria, we always talk about, oh, take down the dictator Assad. Every time you hear the United States talking about take down a dictator, you have to look closely. You can't. You simply it carries no information. Of course, they're always trying to take down a dictator, whatever. But in the case of Syria, one of the big results of the civil war was that most 80% of Syria's oil fields and oil reserves, they got occupied by American soldiers and by American soldiers' allies,
Mhm.
the Kurds in particular. Well, the Kurds were taking Syrian oil and they were selling it to Israel. So you had another source of energy independence for Israel. These complex networks of pipelines, Zionist fanaticism, and American crackpot realism is really the dominant forces of American foreign policy in the Middle East. And I think people would do well to see that. They would do well to see that when they're evaluating what might happen in Iran, and they would also do well to evaluate that with respect to what happens to the Palestinians.
Hmm. Bryce Green, I've got about a minute left. Is there anything you'd like for us to know until next week? What should we be looking out for?
Well, I mean, one of the things I didn't get a chance to talk about was, again, one of these hydrocarbon wars, Venezuela.
Mm.
Venezuela is now in the crosshairs of the American empire for a lot of reasons, and they have been for quite some time. They Ever since their socialist president Hugo Chavez, the U.S. has thought that the Venezuelans are providing a model for how to exist outside of the U.S. empire, and so
Mhm.
that has to be stamped out. That's why they put this crushing sanctions regime. That's why, I mean, some people speculate that they assassinated Hugo Chavez. It's speculation, but
In
it's
South
not on
America,
crazy ground. Yeah, I mean,
because so many of the progressive leaders got cancer at the same time.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, the Trump administration, they had this, failed Bay of Pigs style invasion in
Mhm.
Venezuela. The Biden administration kept up the sanctions regime despite light overtures, and the Trump administration kept the sanctions regime and is now murdering Venezuelan. Uh, I guess ship people. What do you call the people, like sailors, like
Mhm.
people on boats, just murdering them, saying that they're drug dealers. Of course, not providing any evidence. And the Americans have said pretty openly that regime change is the goal. So we should all have our eyes on Venezuela, and as well as these other parts of the world. I mean, it's a crazy world out there. I know you all have like your families to to pay attention to, but I mean, if you're interested in the geopolitical goings on of this, evil empire, uh, well, then these are the areas that you ought to be looking at.
And we should join your Substack.
And you can subscribe to my Substack. You can subscribe for semi-regular articles. Sometimes I post my media appearances there. If you just want to support me in general, just subscribing, becoming a paid subscriber is one way. There's nothing special that you get yet, but that might be coming soon. There are a few other projects I'm working on in the pipeline that I hope to be able to share with you guys in the future.
Well, Bryce Green, I'm going to give you this so that you can post it on your Substack. You can do that, and I want people to join you. And how can we join you on X and other platforms?
Of course, I am. You can follow me if you guys have the video. My name is right here, but it's at the Green BJ, where I tweet about things that are going on, just commentary on the day's events. If that's your thing, then please follow me there.
The brilliant Bryce Green, uh, the Green BJ. And I cannot wait to have you back because you know what? We will talk about Venezuela because that's in our hemisphere, it's in our backyard, and it is right here, everybody. You
I
know,
didn't even get the chance to talk about Ukraine. I mean, like this is there's so much
well,
there's so much
if you have
stuff
any
going.
time over the next couple of days, I'd love to do it because all of these issues are of consequence.
Right.
Because I really want to talk about Venezuela. I really want to talk about Ukraine. You and I met talking about Ukraine. So let me know what your schedule is like over the next few days and let's do it because I think that we have been quite consumed with Israel and Gaza and the West Bank. Well, not the West Bank as much, but we should be. And we should. But we're not talking about the famine in the Sudan. We're not looking at what's happening in the Sahel. We should be looking at Venezuela because Venezuela is they're Americans too. They're right here, and we're provoking a conflict that could be very consequential in a negative way to the United States. We have not won any war on anyone else's soil since World War II. Think about that, everybody. People are not going to let you just roll up on them and insult them. It doesn't work that way. It just doesn't work that way. So let me know what your time is looking like, and let's get right to it because we want to spread more information to people, not misinformation, but the right information. Bryce,
Yes, ma'am.
absolutely. Bryce Green, the Santita Jackson Show. God bless you, everybody.